Hello, viewers. Greetings to you all. Welcome to Father Chinaka's TV, and with us today is Father Kelvin Aneto. Father Kelvin, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here once again. Thanks, viewers. Thanks for having me.
All right, today on Father Chinaka's TV, we want to discuss a trending matter as a way of edifying our erring brethren. Father Kelvin here would help clarify these issues. So can you let us know about your opinion in the comment section? And please, this is not an attack on any politician or any priest. It is an open discussion with the aim of clarifying our audience. So we invite you to listen with an objective mind. So before we begin, we would like you to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to be the first to receive new publications on this channel. Father Kelvin, recently the social media was filled with the news of some utterances made by Reverend Father Mbaka, the spiritual director of the Adoration Ministry in Enugu Diocese, against the presidential aspirant, Mr. Peter Obi, alleging that the latter was a stingy man and that it was cursed. Therefore, he cannot be our president. This has led many people to come out openly to fire back at the man of God and asking him to maintain his lane as a priest and not delve into partisan politics.
A stingy man cannot be our president. We are hungry. We need a generous person. Nigerians are hungry. Are we not hungry?
Wahala. Oh, wow.
Recently, too, we heard that Reverend Father Hyacinth earlier clinched the governorship ticket of the APC in Benue primaries. We heard of his suspension by the bishop until he retraces his step. This has left many people talking about the place of the Catholic priesthood, or whether or not Catholic priests should get themselves involved actively in politics or desist totally from anything politics. Now my question, is there an active or passive role for priests in politics today?
Well, thank you very much, Father. I think that this question is very important because, now in Nigeria, there is a lot going on in the political space. And a lot of persons are, in one way or the other, directly involved in politics now. Even priests and religious are beginning to make political statements, political insinuations, and all of that. But I think we must understand that canon law expressly forbids clergy from actively joining political parties and vying for political offices, right? But then canon law makes it clear that the bishop could give a dispensation for a priest to vie for a political position if that is in the interest of the church for the common good, all right? So it's important we get, but ordinarily, priests shouldn't be partisan. We are not expected to be in political parties. We are not expected to run for political offices, even though that there have been times when priests, clergy have done this in the past, right? There have been times when, historically, when Catholic priests vied for electoral offices and were actually elected. A case in point, is Father Adaso, I think so, yes, that should be the name, okay, who, sought election into a political office, I think sometime in 1993, or thereabout. I'm not very sure about the date, but I think that this must have been a time in Benue State, right? And he actually got elected into political office. But as the church would have it, he was disciplined for that, and he was suspended. His faculties were suspended for that period that he was actively engaged in politics. But when he was done, he came back to the church and the church accepted him and all of that. Recently, you mentioned in your question the role of Father Alia of Benue State, and is currently running under the party APC. Yes, he actually got his form. He passed the primaries, and then he's the official APC gubernatorial candidate for the 2023 elections. But his bishop has come out to give a very public disclaimer on that activity of his, that political activity of his. So obviously, the bishop did not, dispense him to take on that political office. So the bishop has suspended him. The bishop has suspended him from active priestly ministry, and he has also replied. I saw in some documents on social media where Father Alia was said to have, applauded the bishop, and he said, well, this is what the church has to do. He does not have any ill feelings against the church, and he accepts that the church has this discipline, but he feels that at this point in time, he is coming to play a very important factor to bring about social change and political change in the landscape of Benue State. So, well, the church does not allow it. Whenever the church allows it, the church says expressly with the permission of the diocesan bishop.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Father K. This is something we must understand. If it does not go with the express permission of the diocesan bishop, Catholic priests do not have active roles in politics. So, Father Kelvin, this is also another question. It has to do with prophecy and prediction. We know Father Mbaka has been known to make prophecies on the last day of the year, which partly has to do with politics. And during election periods, he usually prophesies the winner of the forthcoming election for the coming year. So a lot of people have reacted against this idea, claiming that it was colored prophecy, that the past prophecies he had made, and that because a party member came and donated money on the adoration ground and others did not, which was the origin of the stingy word against Peter Obi. So many persons have even opined that he does not even prophesy, he really predicts. So how can we clearly explain and differentiate between prophecy and prediction?
I try to be very careful when we're dealing with these kind of matters, and the reason is simple, because you really do not know if people hear God the way they say they do, So people come out all the time to say, oh yes, God told me this, God said I should say this, and all of that. But I do not particularly think that Father Mbaka was directly prophesying when he made those statements about Peter Obi. The particular text I saw, when I say text now, I mean the particular video I saw on social media did not begin. So the moment from which I started watching the clip, it would seem as if Father Mbaka was, making general admonitions, and he was just advising his congregation on what to do, on who to vote for. So for me, they were just like informed personal opinions of his, right? At that point, I did not think he was making any prophecies. Because if you go back to the whole biblical history of prophecy, of how a prophet is seen to be the mouthpiece of God. That is why prophets were referred to as the Navi, like the mouthpiece of God. Those who took messages from God to people and then stood in the breach between God and his people. That's how you understand that whole role of Abraham, the role of Moses. These were the very first prophets that we encounter in scriptures. And prophecy, as we understand from scriptures, is that people spoke what God wanted them to say to the people, right? Now, if you move further down and you go back to the story of Amos, you remember Amos was, more or less one who took care of sycamore trees. And then, when he came, he told the people, look, I was no prophet, but God came to me and asked me to come prophesy to my people Israel. I mean, this is not my vocation. I was not called originally to be a prophet. So God gave him a specific message for the people of Israel, and he came and delivered those messages. So this is the original sense in which we understand prophecy, right? We understand prophecy to mean the acts, if you like, of inspired persons receiving messages from God and translating, if you like, these messages or transmitting. I think that's a more appropriate word, transmitting these messages to the people. So if you put that side by side with what Father Mbaka did in this particular context, then I do not think that was prophecy of any sort. Yeah. I mean, Father Mbaka himself did not say he was making prophecies, right? Yeah. Because after all that backlash on social media and all of the things people said, do not forget, Father Mbaka himself issued a disclaimer and he said, look, I mean, I never meant that in the way that people took it, I'm praying for Peter Obi. I'm praying that God grants him his desires. I'm sorry that people took this out of context. So he humbly apologized, right? Yeah. So I think the problem is more with the followership of Father Mbaka. And this is where the problem really is. And you see, most of the things that we saw people do or write, all of those rejoinders you saw on social media, where people try to do damage control, because those who follow Father Mbaka do not seem to get the distinction between prophecies and fortune telling, and like you said, predictions, right?
Yeah.
Going back to the church fathers, I remember I did a write-up very recently, and I was quoting what St. Thomas Aquinas, says when he categorizes the types of prophecies, if you like. And he says there are three, right? The first one is the prophecy of denunciation. The second one is the prophecy of foreknowledge. And then the third one is the prophecy of predestination, right? So in denunciation, God reveals something that is going to happen, but something that may not happen if we pray or if we do something. You remember when Jonah came to Nineveh, and it says 40 days from now, and Nineveh will be destroyed. That's a prophecy of denunciation.
Prophecy. Yeah, exactly.
All right?
Yeah.
Right? So that in itself was a prophecy of denunciation. So he was saying, look, if you do not repent, 40 days you'll be destroyed. Yeah. And then there's a prophecy of foreknowledge. Prophecy of foreknowledge, happens when God presents events to a person, to a prophet, events that are not within your own knowledge, right? In this situation, God reveals things to the prophet, things that he ordinarily cannot know, okay? So that's a prophecy of foreknowledge, things that will happen, but that you do not know, but that God has now revealed to the prophet. So that's a prophecy of foreknowledge, right? And then the last one is a prophecy of predestination. And it's about God telling the prophet things that he is going to do, right? Things that have been predestined to happen. So if you look at these, these three areas of prophecy, as St. Thomas Aquinas says, you'll discover that what Father Mbaka does during political seasons does not really fit into any of these areas, right? I believe that what Father Mbaka does is, make predictions, like you said, based on the extant situations. Now, a lot of people are going to come for you for holding that opinion, right?
Definitely.
Yes. I wrote something on social media, and a lot of persons are, they are coming for me. They are saying a lot of negative things. And I know that all of us who've done that, we have experienced that kind of thing as well.
Of course.
And then my colleague, Father Kelvin Ugu, he wrote something on that as well. And, he's not seriously. So, but why I think that the followers of Father Mbaka need to be, checked is that they do not seem to understand there's a difference between prophecy, there's a difference between prophecy, predictions, soothsaying,
Exactly.
fortune telling, right?
Yeah.
Now, soothsaying and fortune telling, they have to do with predictions about the future. And these predictions sometimes are diabolical, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes they are not. Sometimes they're just based on reason. You just add 1 + 1. For instance, if I see a man drinking at a beer parlor and he's going to drive, I can predict and say, this man will crash, right?
Of course.
That's a prediction. Yes, that's a prediction based on the things I've seen. It's not a prophecy because I've seen that this is going to happen. But some other times, right, soothsaying or divination or fortune telling could have a diabolical undertone, right?
Okay.
Now, if you go back to Acts of the Apostles chapter 16, Acts of the Apostles chapter 16, you remember that whole story of Paul and Silas, their encounter with the slave girl who had a demon of fortune telling, right? Yeah. Now, this slave girl was making a lot of money for the masters. But as soon as Paul looks back and casts out this demon, the girl fell silent. And that was how Paul and Silas got in jail, and they were arrested and all of that. So true prophets could not stand the presence of this demonic force that was, soothsaying. So when Paul decides to, exorcise that girl of that demon, it became bad for business. It became bad for business, right? So really, I think it's important for us to begin to make distinctions between what's actually prophecy, what's prediction, what's fortune telling. Because, and I think I have to make this point, and I think that to a very large extent, many of us today do a lot of fortune telling, right? Because fortune telling is it's telling people's fortunes. We say, tomorrow you will buy a car, amen. You'll build a house, amen. It's always about, it's almost like a motivational speech kind of thing. So I am telling your fortunes, you'll do well, you'll do great. It will be well with you and your family, amen. Ordinarily, there's nothing wrong with that. But when it is mistaken to be prophecy, that is where you have the problem.
Wow, that's awesome, Father. And dear viewers, I believe you are actually enjoying this program. If you have the thoughts, you could also let us know in the comment section. Thank you, Father Kevin, for these wonderful insights. So we know that what is called prediction is prediction. Somebody observes critically a situation at hand, and it could easily foretell what could happen from the result of the experience he has had. And prophecy, if you want to prophesy, one is speaking in the place of God. God is actually sending the person to speak on his behalf. And to look at prophecy itself, prophecy is not biased, and whatever God has sent the prophets to say will definitely come to pass. So when we look at those who have made predictions, some of their predictions have come to pass, some of them have actually not seen the light of the day. And we say, because God cannot tell us to say something, and at the end of the day, it will not see the light of the day. And who is deceiving who? God does not deceive. He cannot deceive himself, neither would he deceive us. Thank you very much for that, Kevin. And just the last question. A few days ago on Sunday, I learned about the protest going on at the Adoration Ground arising from the intervention of the Bishop of Enugu Diocese, Most Reverend Callisto Sonaga, as a disciplinary measure on Father Mbaka in curbing his recent utterances against Mr. Peter Obi, bearing in mind that this is not the first time a similar thing had happened. So part of the reaction of the people reads, Onaga must go. When I saw that, the placard raised, I felt so horrible that this is so absurd. This reflects the ignorance of the people who seem to lack knowledge on the church's hierarchy, the supremacy of the bishop over the priest, and above all, the vow of obedience made to the bishop by the cleric on the day of ordination. Now my question, could you please explain to our viewers now the submissiveness of priests to that bishop from the very moment of the ordination, which we know as the vow of obedience?
All right, yeah. This is a very good question because very often, like you said, people do not seem to get it, right?
Yeah.
Now, diocesan priests, Father Mbaka is a diocesan priest.
Yeah.
Diocesan priests make a promise of obedience, right?
Yeah.
And this is also known as canonical obedience in canon law. In other words, you make a promise to obey your bishop in everything that the law stipulates. All right.
Yeah.
And I also know that religious make a vow of obedience to their superior. So why you have religious making a vow or taking a vow of obedience? Secular priests are also diocesan priests. They make a promise of canonical obedience. Here, I want us to look. Please permit me to open the canon law here because I want to be very precise, right?
Right.
If you know the codes that deal with the rights and privileges of priests, that there are actually a bit many from 273 to 289, right? Now these codes talk about the rights and privileges of priests. And then Canon 273 says, clerics are bound by a special obligation to show reverence and obedience to the Supreme Pontiff, first of all, and then to their own ordinary, who, of course, in the case of the diocesan priest, is the bishop, right? So in this situation, yes, clerics are bound by the special obligation. It's an obligation, you know. So, you know, they promise to obey their bishops in everything stipulated by law. So how does that translate to what we saw in what happened a few days back and how we think that Father Mbaka should or should not have reacted, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now if you go back, if you go back to some penal, there's something I want us to look at too.
Okay.
Why we are considering obedience in the context of law, right? It is important that we look at Canon 1205, Canon 1205.
Okay.
It talks about sacred places, right? Now this canon says sacred places are those which have been designated for divine worship or for the burial of the faithful through a dedication or blessing, which the liturgical books prescribe for this purpose, right?
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so before a place can be used for adoration, it is presumed that this place would have been blessed, right? If this place is to be used for permanent worship, this place would have been dedicated. Okay, so either of these. Now, if this place is dedicated or if it is blessed, then it means it has approval, express approval of the diocesan bishop, right? For that place to function effectively. Okay, now I want us to look very quickly at Canon 1210. Now, 1210 says, only those things which serve the exercise or promotion of worship, piety, and religion are to be admitted into a sacred place. Only those things which serve the exercise or promotion of worship, piety, and religion are to be admitted into a sacred place. Anything which is not in accord with the holiness of the place is forbidden. You take this code and you juxtapose it with what happened at the adoration ground, you discover that it was sacrilege on many levels. Sacrilege on many levels, right? Now, you already mentioned that the bishop had, written to say, look, we are suspending worship from going on in this. Of course, it's well within his rights. Don't forget, I just quoted the law that says, a place before it can be used for worship has to be blessed or dedicated, right? And it's the bishop who grants dispensation for that. It's the bishop who gives permission to do that. So just as the bishop has permission to bless a place, the bishop has permission to say, well, because of X, Y, Z, I think for now, this place should not be used for what it is supposed to be used for as a result of what has happened. So the bishop was well within his right to have said, look, pause. What many of us expected, right, was that since that law was given and Father Mbaka agreed to it, of course, we would later see his submission. He wrote another letter saying that he's fully in communion with his bishop and that the bishop is his superior and that the bishop, God uses or runs the ministry through the instrumentality of the bishop. So Father Mbaka knows all of these things. So the question is, why do the people not know?
That is a problem.
In the first place, yes, in the first place, I felt that Father Mbaka should have ensured that people did not gain access into the adoration ground on Sunday. I mean, you could say, oh, how do we expect him to have done that? Simple. I would have expected Father Mbaka to be present on the adoration ground. And actually, because he should have known. And if I were the one, I would know that some persons will still come. So my responsibility that day will be to be there to say, look, we are agreeing with what the bishop has said. Mm-hmm. So please, there'll be no mass here today. Let's all go home. And then that would have, of course, the people will listen to him. They've listened to him in the past. They keep listening to him. So that would have saved that situation. But to see adorers, as he calls them, to see adorers waving branches and shouting, Onaga must go. No more bishop. No more bishop. That is sacrilege taken too far, right?
Yeah.
It's sacrilege taken too far. Yeah, so I was quoting some laws earlier, and I said, look, the bishop was well within his right to have done what he did. Because Canon 1213 says clearly that the ecclesiastical authority freely exercises its powers and functions in sacred places. Freely exercises its powers and functions in sacred places. That's Canon 1213. That's what it says. So the bishop has the right to have given such an order. So the question is, who gave these persons the audacity, so to speak, to have acted in the manner in which they did? It is arguable. We can say, well, it was not Father Mbaka. Yeah. Father Mbaka is a peace-loving person. He's a humble man. He would always, submit to his bishop. But why would the people feel that it is right to have done what they did? Now, do not forget that last year, precisely early May, right? I think on the 6th or 5th of May, I can't remember, but I think it was during that period. You remember that some group of adorers had gone to the bishop's compound,
yes,
broke through the fence, destroyed some windows.
Yes.
It was everywhere. In fact, I read a Punch report. It was a Punch report, Punch newspapers. I read a Punch report that it took the help of security forces to prevent those persons from doing further damage to the bishop's house. And my brother, when Father Mbaka came back, I did not hear anywhere that he categorically condemned those who performed that activity. I stumbled on a video where he was talking to his people when he came back. There was a whole big story during that period. Father Mbaka said he was adopted, he was said to have been kidnapped, and the people were looking for him. And Father Archie, who is the communications director, would later say in an interview to a Catholic news agency that, Father Mbaka was not kidnapped. He came out to say Father Mbaka was not kidnapped by anybody, that the bishop invited him. He was with the bishop. The bishop had released a statement then saying, and this is the first time, it was in 2021, May 2021, that the Adoration Center was to be shut down. The bishop said, look, my brother, come and undergo a retreat for a certain period. But because of that mob action, that whole thing could not take place anymore. Because Father Mbaka later had to be, he came out and later came out. He did no longer undergo that retreat he was supposed to undergo. So the big question is, what kind of teaching do these persons receive in that adoration ground? And whether you like it or not, Father Mbaka is responsible for the, for the actions of those in that particular adoration ground, So it's not about whether or not you are jealous of Father Mbaka. It's not about whether or not you hate Father Mbaka. The simple truth is that he is responsible for the actions of those in that adoration ground. And that's the truth of the matter, my brother.
Father, you are just right. I cannot disagree with you on this. This is just the plain truth. And I would like to quote Bishop Godfrey Ona. I think he released a statement which is quite compatible with the situation at hand, which I believe it was somehow addressing the situation. He said, Pentecostal superficiality destroys the church faster than Islamic fundamentalism because it is killing the church from inside, ridding it of its own content. And that is the problem that we are facing in the church today. So if as a man of God, I own an adoration ministry as it is, I should be able to carry my people along, with the authentic Catholic faith. This is how things are done in the church. The church has its own hierarchy. As the spiritual director of the adoration ministry, he is not a GO. People mistake that. People think Mbaka is like a GO, a God on his own, who directs his affairs, or that his bishop was jealous of him and they had to prevent him from doing what he's supposed to do. So that is just a problem. The onus lies on the hands of priests ourselves. It lies on our hands to continue to carry our people along and let them know these things. And when we don't do these things, it backfires on us. And that's why we see things like this, Pentecostal superficiality, killing ourselves, fighting ourselves. If the people of God could come out and protest against the bishop, the very bishop that can send that priest on studies indefinitely, like just get out of the diocese and go somewhere else, or send the priest on years of private retreat. People don't know the power of the bishop, and so that is a problem. That is a problem we think we have. We can react on anything, fight the bishop because the bishop is taking our favorite priest and all. So this is something we have. These are plain truths. That is how the church operates. The church is not a Pentecostal or one, church that woke up yesterday and decided to run the things in its own way. So I believe this video has answered the majority of the questions actually sent to me. I decided to invite Father Kevin and Hector to assist in, at least when they see a different priest addressing this question. Maybe people are already used to it. So when they see a different priest addressing this with a fresh insight, they would come to understand it better. So in a very special way, I want to appreciate Father Kevin for coming online. Father Kevin has been a good brother to me. He has been available. I've reached out to him over a couple of times, and he has made himself available to come online and contribute to an ongoing discussion. Father Kevin here, I know he may not recall meeting me. I met him those days when I was in my final year philosophy. He was our first prefect back then, Bodija, when we used to go there to study. I met you one-on-one a couple of times. I believe you must have forgotten totally. So, but it's just it's nice having you once again to speak with you. He's somebody that we usually look up to those days as our big mentors, as our big brothers those days. I heard his homilies as a deacon then, and also it was wonderful. So nice having you online here, and thanks for coming. And we hope that in the future, when we ask you to help address one or two issues, you will always make out time for us here on Father Chinaka's TV.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Father Father Chinaka Umberi. I don't know if I got that right.
Yeah, Umberi. Yeah,
Umberi, yes. So you know, I know that we are capping and we are rounding off. There's an area I want to draw your attention to, which I think we could look at, you know, subsequently. Okay. And that's the humanness and the humaneness, and if you like, the humility of Bishop Callistus Onaga in all of these events. You know, nobody has talked about that. Nobody has talked about how calm this bishop has been, how patient this bishop has
tolerance.
Yeah, you know, I sometimes I sit in my room and I'm like, wow. I mean, this bishop teaches us not to abuse power, even when he has legitimate rights to use those powers. I mean, you see him delaying, you know, trying to be fatherly. If you were to be the bishop of Enugu Diocese and some of your parishioners came to destroy your house, what would you do to the priest who is responsible for mentoring those parishioners, right? So I look at this man and I say, wow, God bless him. God bless him. It's a gift to the church. It's a gift to the church, you know. Yeah. I just hope that we'll have a session where we could just talk about, you know, bishops and how, you know, how patient, you know, many of them are in dealing with some of these issues. People will even say that the bishop is jealous of Adam Baka. Oh my God, laughable.
It's laughable. It's
Thank
laughable.
you very much.
Yeah, I will look towards that, Father, and I will let you know, depending on your schedule. Yeah, thank you very much. And dear viewers, thank you for being with us. Thanks for your patience, and continue to follow our channel. And as you do that, we promise to always update you and keep you posted with our frequent publications.